a lot of your best writers, I think they're best, are from years ago.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of history with it. I love to read, about the pioneers. And then in Nebraska with the Republican River, was taken there, and it was so interesting to me because my grandparents lived there. When they came over from Germany, they lived in the bank of a stream, in a dirt bank, just dug in. And then Dad said, he was, I don't know how old, he was the oldest child. And they got their water just out of the stream. That was their water, and that drank, and then all children got typhoid fever. And then they were also crabby and, crying and in pain. And because he was the oldest one and was, Grandma thought he was the strongest, he had to carry his brothers. Well, his brothers were such big, clumsy, little punchy kids, and it affected his spine. So my dad had a curvature of the spine, suffers the rest of his life. And then this lady was telling us, just so pretty in that area with all the trees. And she said when her mother first was there and then she grew up, there wasn't a tree there. But this flood brought in all the seed, the different bushes and the trees. And now the trees are just solid along the highway, and it's just so pretty. And it's called Red Willow, that creek. And they have the red willow there, and I said, oh, now I know where my basket from Grandma. She had the red willow basket, and she always kept her socks and her whatever she had, a mending patch. And so I have her red willow mending basket.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. Thank you all. I think we're coming to the end of this hour. Myra, thank you very much. Those are great stories. Appreciate that. Okay.
Well, I'm Darren Linesquirk, and I think from listening to all of your stories, it really surprised me about how hard you had to work in the fields as you were growing up, and how everyone had to wear dresses and you had to be in the beet fields and down working. And I think that's a pretty awesome story, because I don't think kids nowadays, especially girls, would be out there in the fields working hard like that. And yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. And also, it's amazing that you lived on the farm and lived the farm life for such a long period of time. And I think that that's a pretty amazing thing. And you saw so many different technologies come in and everything, and but you still found ways to keep it old-fashioned. You're still old-fashioned ways that work better, even though machines, like you said, machines do everything now, but you still found some ways to utilize yourself on the farm.
Very good. All right.
Okay, my name is Brooke Bazinski, and I just like to say that when I researched on the internet about Weld County, the biggest thing that came up was the whole sugar beet sort of as a cash crop, and the different sorts of workers that came in as a result of that crop. And so first was the German workers that came in, and then they worked the fields, and then as they acquired the fields and they sort of planted them, then the next group was sort of the Mexican group, I believe, or Hispanic, and I think it was neat hearing from her story how they actually had groups of people, like a family that would stay with the family, and then they'd be responsible for their care, and that group would just work on the fields and help them as I got with the fields. And I think that's just really neat, and it ties in the research about all the sugar beet crops, and it ties it in to hear a story about how that happened. And I guess another interesting thing about the sugar beet crop is how, as I learned on the internet, they built refineries and stuff in the towns, and they built railroads sort of between the towns so they could transport the sugar beets. And I think it's neat how that sort of, I guess, how it got phased out after a while because of the cane sugar, I learned. And so they had to rip down the factories, and how now it's not really that great of a cash crop because it's hard to transport them, and it's not as much worth it anymore. So that was sort of a neat thing. I guess also like the literature part was neat that she wrote down every book that she's really ever read. And I guess it would be neat to hear about the different sorts of like, I don't know, how authors reflect their time period and how, I don't know, what people think about the time period that they lived in and how it was written about. That would be really interesting. But I guess, I don't know, I think the main thing about Weld County that's neat as far as, I think, Myra, I think it's neat that she's still involved in the farm, and I know that a lot of times there's been sort of a crisis with the farmland that people have that grew up on farms now haven't wanted to work on the farms again, and they've wanted to get away from that. So people are losing farmland and it's getting sold for development, and I think it's neat that she stayed on the farm, and she said some of her one of her sons or something also worked on a farm. So it's neat that they kept that sort of tradition in their family rather than moving away from the city. So that's just neat to hear about. That's all.
Very good. All right. Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is Corey Wall, and I think it's interesting hearing about all of Myra's stories of working on the farm and the agriculture in Weld County. When I was researching it, I found out that I think it's right, but it's the third most agricultural county in the United States, and that was kind of amazing to hear. And it's amazing how much it's changed from the early 1900s till today, and how everybody supported their families with the farms and went through all the hardships that we most of us don't even know about today. We are all used to electricity and not farming with our own bare hands, and it's just amazing to me that people would even not even understand our history, and I don't think we should be able to live where we do and not know about what people went through before today. And
That's true. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. That's sort of what they say.
yeah.
Very good. All right. Yes, sir.
My name is Ted Mitchell. I think what I found most fascinating is just everything that Myra's been talking about. I mean, we learn in school and stuff about the Great Depression, World War I, and World War II, but we never really hear personal stories about people who were actually around at that time, actually living it. What I found really interesting too was about the prisoners of war that Myra said they would come and visit them and let them take them out of the camp. And also just growing up in a time without so much technology, stuff like that. You spend all day, like she said, no real free time. There's always stuff that has to be done every day, 7 days a week. And it's like her parents and her grandparents were the first ones out here pretty much. It's interesting to see how much it's grown. And I think it's pretty cool that we're doing this because we're actually putting this on record so it's not forgotten and so her story can live on through generations and generations so we don't forget where we came from.
His point, Myra, is about when you were, work came first. The farm work had to be done, no question. But still, your parents and grandparents, they were very much interested in you getting to school, or kids getting to school, right? It meant a lot for the parents to get, they didn't just want you to be a worker, they wanted you to better yourself through education.
Now, that was one thing that both of the parents had education. My grandmother was a graduate of the University of Berlin, you know, and then my dad, I found they used to have a little college something years and years ago in Greeley, and then he took well, it was with his handwriting and I don't know what, all more kind of, not bookkeeping, but it was with writing and records like that. He had that, and oh, and then my mother, stepmother, but she always laughed. She said, what we had when we were in the school and college, she said the third graders know as much as they did then. You know, it's just, she was always just amazed with what my children had come home and talk about. And she said, well, we didn't even have that in college, she said, when I went. There's a lot of things.
And she went to the University of Berlin, is that?
My grandmother.
Your grandmother did?
Mhm.
Oh. Wow.
So,
Yes, sir.
My name's Aaron Koski. It was just fascinating for me to hear about the way technology and advanced her way of lifestyle from like when she grew up on the farm, just doing things by hand, to what we have today within farm, within tractors and everything's basically done with machines. It's just really fascinating for me to hear how that process of processing the beets and doing all the chores on the farm progressed from as she was younger to when she got older, as she is now. It was also really interesting to hear like just all of her stories about the World War II, the Great Depression, and how it directly affected her and her family and her way of life.
And what Myra's, I think, seeding for all of you is that when you make your museum visits and when you get a chance to go back to the internet, now that you've had a little bit of first-hand experience, you get a kind of direction you can pursue, because a lot of the things she's talked about today, you'll find a lot more information about, especially in the Greeley Museum now. The new Greeley Museum is terrific, if you can get over and see that, because that really encompasses all of the Greeley Museum talks about all of these things, and it puts a timeline onto life in Weld County. And so, you know, Myra represents this enormous period of transition that really revolutionized the Front Range. And so now we're seeing the ups and downs of what all this means. You pick up any newspaper now, you see that agriculture is in huge transition, probably in a greater transition than it's ever been, because the economics of agriculture have so radically shifted to where agriculture now has to compete with urbanization. And you know, in a lot of cases, urbanization wins. So you have to look in the bigger perspective of how important agriculture was to bringing the culture, everybody's lives forward. Agriculture built Weld County, you know, and it's now sustaining Weld County. And the question is, you know, is that going to persist? So you can kind of answer that question, but at least as you monitor what's happening now, because it's in the newspapers and on television accounts every day of where it's going. But it changed lives, and it continues to change lives. So at least you got a good snapshot now, and thanks to Myra for all the work she's done here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
okay.
Mention to you